Hidden Greatness. Lessons from the Testimony of Saint Jane de Chantal. My dear friends, today we turn to one of the most precious spiritual documents in Christian history, the testimony of Saint Jane de Chantal about her spiritual father and friend, Saint Francis de Sales. It's not a mere biography or a tale of admiration. It is sworn testimony, a deposition made under oath in 1627 during the first canonization process of Saint Francis de Sales. Jane de Chantal, then 55 and superior of the Visitation Sisters, gave a week of her life to recall with loving precision the man she knew better than anyone. And what shines through is not just a saint described by another saint, but a luminous model of how holiness looks in daily life. Let us draw from her testimony 5 timeless lessons that can guide our own journey to holiness. The first lesson, the greatness of ordinary holiness. Saint Jane begins by showing us something extraordinary, that Francis de Sales deliberately avoided being extraordinary. He didn't seek dramatic gestures, miraculous signs, or heroic displays that attract crowds. He chose the common way, but in such a divine and heavenly manner that, as Jane said, this was the most wonderful thing about his life. His holiness was built quietly, like a steady flame burning through 1,000 unnoticed acts of virtue. Saint Jane herself, who was prone to extremes, admired this perfect balance in him, a harmony of virtues that seemed almost invisible to others. And here lies our first lesson. Holiness is not found in rare, spectacular acts, but in the faithful perfection of ordinary duties. It's not about dazzling deeds, it's about the sanctity of patience, kindness, duty, and fidelity lived day after day. The second lesson, charity without limits. The second lesson comes from his boundless charity. Jane de Chantal recalls that Francis never refused to meet anyone, whether it was a nobleman or a poor widow, a bishop or a beggar. He welcomed all with equal gentleness. Some thought he was wasting his time on unimportant people. His reply, these small matters are as important to poor people as great ones are to the rich. Surely, we owe ourselves to everyone alike. That was his rule of life, to be available to all without exception. Even toward his enemies, he showed astonishing kindness. If they put out one of my eyes, he once said, the other would still look at them kindly. This kind of love is exhausting. And Jane tells us, it literally wore him out and shortened his life. But what a lesson he leaves us. Real charity costs us not something. It takes time, patience, and the willingness to be interrupted. Saint Francis teaches us that no one is too small to deserve our attention, and no wound too deep to deserve our care. Third lesson, the secret of inner peace. A third lesson from Saint Jane's testimony, the serenity of Saint Francis de Sales. She describes him as having imperturbable peace. Once someone asked him if he ever got angry. His reply was gentle and wise. Do you want me to lose in 15 minutes the little bit of control I have gained in 20 years? His peace was not natural calmness. It was hard-earned mastery over himself. He transformed anger into patience, bitterness into sweetness, trials into prayer. Even when insulted, mocked, or falsely accused, even when lampoons were placed on his bishop's throne, he responded with forgiveness. Jane de Chantal saw that his serenity sprang from one unshakable truth. He saw everything, joys and sufferings alike, as coming from the hand of God. His watchful and vivid faith made him see providence in every event, and that made him free. This, dear friends, is our third lesson. Inner peace is not the absence of trouble, but the fruit of trusting God's plan. It's a peace we must train ourselves to keep through patience, prayer, and surrender. The fourth lesson, humility and the freedom of detachment. Another striking lesson Jane gives us concerns his humility. Francis de Sales had an almost joyful contempt for self-importance. He wanted to be considered less than he was. He refused honors and promotions. He dreamed of dying poor, owning nothing, and that is exactly what happened. He died in a gardener's house with nothing but his faith and his peace. He used to say that contempt and humiliation were precious exercises of virtue. His humility freed him from anxiety and fear. He was not trying to impress anyone. He was simply trying to please God. And what can we learn from that? Humility is not thinking less of ourselves, it's thinking of ourselves less. When we are detached from power, praise, and possessions, we discover a new kind of joy, the freedom of simplicity. Saint Francis de Sales teaches us that the poorest person in spirit is the richest in peace. Fifth lesson, prayer in everything. The final lesson Jane de Chantal draws is that Francis's whole life was prayer. She says, his life was an uninterrupted prayer. He taught others that prayer is not something apart from daily work, it is woven through it. Whether writing letters, visiting the sick, or hearing confessions, he turned everything into an act of love toward God. He encouraged his followers to return to the thought of God again and again, even amid their tasks. He was perfectly detached from whether things went well or badly, whether he was praised or blamed, healthy or ill. His only desire was that God's will be done. He once said, leave grand virtues to exalted souls. Let us praise the small ones that grow at the foot of the cross. And that's the final message for us. True prayer transforms everything, work, suffering, and even silence into love. To conclude, the melody of love. Saint Jane de Chantal's testimony is not just a portrait of a saint, it's a guidebook for every Christian soul. She shows us how Saint Francis de Sales lived 5 interwoven virtues: ordinary holiness in daily duty, charity that reaches everyone, peace born of trust in providence, humility that brings inner freedom, and prayer that sanctifies all life. His was not a spirituality for cloisters alone. It was meant for people like us, living in the noise and stress of the world. Saint Jane's voice still speaks today. Holiness is possible wherever love is possible. So, my dear friends, let us begin again, calmly, confidently, and joyfully to live as Saint Francis de Sales did. Faithful in small things, cheerful in trials, and always resting in God's heart. And may we, like him, learn the song of love so that one day in eternity we may sing it perfectly forever. Live Jesus.